Let's talk about Lent. In the Philippines, there is a holiday period called Holy Week. It comprises of 3 to 4 suspended school and work days. This holiday period would also affect the programming that was being aired on TV at the time. And the change of programming is not restricted to the week. Sometimes, other channels will start 1 week early, or at worst, some will do 3 weeks. It would be the most boring times of my life as a child, teen, and young adult because for some reason, I was also barred from playing video games until a certain age. And as a young adult, I was also very poor. So yeah, this is basically hell for an introvert. Entertainment at the time of Holy Week would depend on what channel did not choose to air any religious programming for a week. At the time, we were lucky if they would air specials from cartoons, and that's very, very rare, and would only last a few moments, not enough to fill the long, boring hours of the week. But then, one fateful Holy Week, we had a broken PS2 and a TV with almost nothing on other than static and the most boring Catholic TV specials ever aired. I would soon rather watch 2 hours of static rather than endure 30 minutes of any of those TV specials. Until, in one channel, my brother and I saw a different kind of TV specials, where 3 blokes drive convertible sports cars from Iraq to Bethlehem, emulating the journey of the 3 wise men. The channel would then continue to air episodes from the season before that TV special. That was when I discovered Top Gear. Top Gear is a British TV show about cars. The show was hosted by the 3 previously mentioned presenters: Jeremy Clarkson, who is loud, Richard Hammond, who's accident prone, and James May, who is slow. They would be accompanied by the legendary Stig, who has now 4 children, and are currently starring on the current season of Super Sentai. Episodes mostly comprise of the trio doing car reviews, road tests, and the just absurd, insane challenges. If you watched my Dark Souls video, it's obvious that my favorite special is the second Africa special. They have done a shit ton on their collected time on Top Gear and Grand Tour. They've destroyed cars, made several car versus commuter races, made their own mobile homes, turned motorcycles into water vehicles, race God, convert a caravan into a blimp, travel via self-built car, race with trucks, discover the true source of the Nile, travel in second-hand boats, drive through deserts, race through a snowy mountain, and a whole lot more. Destroying cars! Boy, for a car show, they do blow up a lot of cars. Oh, wait, there's more.
This car is simply invincible. Stopped. He's given up. And on that bombshell, back to the studio.
The show is commonly formatted with an opening feature, which oftenly would be a car review or the first portion of their challenge, or adventure, or road trip. Then they would have a chat segment concerning recent events and developments in the motoring world. They are really funny, although some of them have aged poorly, so your mileage may vary, and if you're curious, seek them out. Then there would be a celebrity interview segment where an actor or actress would then lap on the racetrack on a relatively cheap car, or a reasonably priced car, if you will. Then would be the closing segment. This is where the second part of the initial segment would continue, or they would show a documentary, another short interview, or sometimes a bit of both. This is where films like the Saab tribute or the Shelby documentary would be. That would be Top Gear for at least 22 seasons until, sadly, that era, dubbed the Clarkson era by fans, abruptly stopped due to a myriad of controversy befalling the show, all centering on their most popular presenter, Jeremy Clarkson. On 2015, Clarkson was dismissed from the show and the BBC did not renew his contract. According to what I read in the wiki, the dismissal was due to Clarkson having a fight with producer Oisin Taiman. Just note that this was followed by multiple controversial incidents. One very notable incident was an incident in the Patagonia special that ended in quite a terrifying note. I won't get into it here, but if you need more detailed information on the history of Top Gear, Jeremy's dismissal, and the end of the Clarkson era, there is a fantastic video made by the creator, Gear Knob Official, titled How Three Idiots Accidentally Conquered the World. After Clarkson's dismissal, Richard, James, and most of the creatives of Top Gear left as well. And after 1 year, the Grand Tour was created. Needless to say, the previous format of the show was not altogether. Remember that segment where celebrities are interviewed, then made to drive a lap? Well,
Does that mean he's not coming on then?
No, James, he's not.
celebrity brain crash segments were such a disaster because the BBC sued them. Probably for the format, although you have to know this format was made only because Jeremy Clarkson started the first Top Gear reboot inspired by his own home videos. Would you believe James wasn't even allowed to say, "Oh, cock," or anything similar because the Grand Tour team was afraid of more lawsuits from the BBC. The first 2 seasons of the Grand Tour were mixed in quality. It's like some of Top Gear's more normal seasons with notable highlights like a military drill exercise in Jordan where the 3 fail countless times, a giant version of Battleship where the ships are ugly cars, Hammond getting hit by a tranquilizer and waking up above ground, finally setting the bet on whether the McLaren P1 or the Porsche 918 was faster. We may not have gotten Jennifer Clarkson, but we still got to see his house explode, which his neighbors pretty much did not like at all. Then there is the third season. Grand Tours Season 3 lasted 14 episodes, and I think it was the funniest of the first 3 seasons. I wanted to focus on this season in particular because this was the last season the studio format was used. This season also serves as a kind of transitional season. If you've seen some of it, you may get an idea as to why. And without further ado, here are my scattered thoughts on each episode of Season 3 of the Grand Tour. The first episode is Motown Funk, where the three go to Motor City, Detroit. Jeremy plays up his frustration of the city's transformation, even saying some quite ironic things. He talks about how James has fallen for the city's garden initiative, and is quite frustrated that Detroit isn't a place for petrol heads anymore. I think he's talking about the city's history with motoring and car manufacturing. But I find it profoundly hilarious and kind of inspiring how Jeremy is like Detroit nowadays, a cornerstone of the motoring industry who's now a contributor to society. And are you aware of the Clarkson clause? He's actually done a lot for farmers. This episode is quite fun. There's quite an underrated moment where James says, "I'm gonna bust your ass, devil boy," in a fake southern accent, and it's quite funny. Episode 2 and 3 is the Columbia special, where their mission is to take wildlife photos without mentioning the C word. There's a lot of callbacks to where they found out the Jeep was a gay-friendly car, and there's a lot of proud of you jokes in the episode, so your mileage may vary. Speaking of the cars, James bought a Fiat Panda, which apparently belonged to some liberal people or something, I don't know. And Hammond bought the most unsightly monster truck I've ever seen. Regarding Clarkson's Jeep in this episode, it didn't come with a roof. I remember back when I was a kid, my dad had a Jeep, and that Jeep had roofing stuff. You can attach it on the car when you need it. Did the seller just not include it, or did Jeremy just forgot? Also, this should be a meme.
It was living up there and it's had engine failure and it's crashed here.
Describing episode 4 does a disservice to it. This is an episode that's just entertaining and funny to watch. The main premise of the challenges are quite hilarious. But why is there a dude in stocks? Anyway, episode 5 highlights a bizarre rant from Richard Hammond that you should hear to believe. Episode 6 is where they feature second-hand Western luxury cars for the use of Chinese business people. The second half of this episode have the three hired drivers to drive them to their businesses in China. And in their backseat, instead of doing emails, they prepared some bizarre activities. James paints, Hammond for some reason cooks, and Jeremy makes Kato make a tower of matches. Also, Jeremy has a butler in his trunk, which is just horrifying. I could say more, but this episode is just really funny too, so I'll give you a sample.
And is the birthplace of communism in China, and today it stands as an anti-capitalist shrine. Having paid our respects to communism,
Episode 7 is the Scottish road trip with three rare Irish cars, apparently proving that they're great at investment. This is not a great investment. This plan will surely end well. Andy Willman, the producer, prepared bikes as backup vehicles. One of the highlights of this would be when Jeremy removes the roof of Hammond's Fiat after a day of drifting because he locked himself out of the pub and mocked him for having to ride a bike because Jeremy almost blew up the engine of his own car. Speaking of pranks, pranks are quite common in a lot of episodes of Top Gear and Grand Tour. Stickers, specific paint jobs, controversial political slogans, or just mixing the letters of their co-presenters' cars. It's all for just japes in the end, and although some of them do kind of become really petty or just destructive. Anyway, all three cars depreciated except for Hammond's because it exploded. Moving on. Next episode is a special.
What separates us from the animals is reason and defecating in private.
It's a road trip in Las Vegas, Nevada, in customized RVs. Jeremy's concept was amazing, but sadly not realized properly. You would roast under the sun on that boat RV. James made an amazing mobile bar. Hammond decided to drive in a hovel with alien attracting gear. One of the highlights of this special is the dune buggy racing, which looks fantastic. It even awakened James's need for speed. Look at how delighted they are to see James blast through the track. Speaking of which, I think I just neglected one of the other things people disliked about the first season of the Grand Tour. Let's talk about the American. The American is a bizarre stereotype of a southern white American. He has his moments, but most of the time he's just not that funny. He dislikes every car he's supposed to drive around the track, and he just says very weird things. And that vibe he gives, where he just hates on everything, just rubbed everyone off the wrong way, even non-Americans. I'm not American, and it really was uncomfortable for me to watch too. This third season, this episode makes him funny. In his only appearance since the first season, and he doesn't even say a word. He just stalks the boys and even quote-unquote shoots Hammond. They then drive up to a dried-up lake and they encounter quite a precarious situation in where Jeremy loses his brakes while driving on top of his RV. Then James and Richard have to pinch the RV in between theirs to stop it. After this debacle, since the RVs are mostly just junk, they decided to put them in a demolition derby. Next episode features a documentary about astronauts and their cars. It also has Jeremy on his patented reviews, this one on the Citroen C3 Aircross. Episode 10 starts with a review on 80s sports cars.
O.J. Simpson had one, and presumably wore driving gloves.
The Testarossa and the Countach. Christ, the styling on 80s cars looks so sleek. What the hell happened to car styling, man? They're comparatively slow though, but that's just because they're made in the 80s. But they still do look damn good. The guys also then do a challenge to make 3 new hatchbacks look appealing to millennials who are at this time of writing. Jeremy is a cheater since he already does Instagram, and James hilariously wins the challenge by making a car unboxing video which is still live and you can still watch on YouTube. Episode 11 of this season might be one of my favorite episodes in all of Grand Tour and Top. This is the special road trip that starts from Georgia to Azerbaijan. It features a lot of shenanigans along the way, including one where Jeremy and James plot and successfully Simpson-style removes the head of Stalin's statue and place it on Hammond's car. Hammond's reaction to the modification is funny, and the people's reaction to his car is shirt-tugging hilarious. Also, the fact that Hammond keeps calling him Nigel Mansell is funny. Now, let's be serious for a moment. The next segment is very enlightening. After being lost and going to the wrong highway drop-off point, the guys find themselves on what Jeremy dubs the border that isn't a border. I find it quite interesting that they constantly try to put themselves into these situations. The traffic in Africa, the party in Cambodia, the incident in Patagonia. It makes good TV, and yes, It's a very your mileage very thing. But I think it's kind of sad that no other personalities put themselves in these situations nowadays. It has to be either super safe or just triggering the other side of who you're arguing with in the political spectrum. You'd say it's distasteful, but I never really knew the border issues with Russia before this. Please note that I watched this special back when it came out, and at that time, none of us knew things would happen the way they are now. I look back at the first special I saw, the Three Wise Men special, and remember how beautiful the place was when that special was filmed. It's quite tragic that there are areas there and near there that's still in tumult. This way of presenting issues makes you aware of these issues and be more empathetic to the ones who are affected by these issues. Well, I don't know how to transition to that, so we'll just get to it. The Stavi International Motor Park section. This challenge is kind of devious. The boys did a few laps and they spotted people taking times. Andy Willman then sent the challenge asking how fast they can do when they need to pee. I cannot imagine what it feels like working with Mr. Willman. I was laughing my ass off from when they began chatting about weeing up to when they're racing for the restrooms. And then...
Well, I solved the problem, second corner.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
James,
I'm having a waz.
I mean, I would have done the same as Clarkson. And I would also bathe in wine. Now for my favorite test. James's traffic test. Showing how all cars in the real world are practically the same. Abby Eaton will use an old Renault 9 with a 2-minute head start, and the boys, thanks to traffic, never ever caught up. And as James states here,
All cars in the real world go at the same speed because how fast they go is dictated by external factors, not the car itself. Traffic lights, speed cameras, other cars, pedestrian crossing, all these things just bunch everybody up.
it's quite a good point. Episode 12 opens with a Lancia tribute section, which is quite cool. Then followed by a Porsche anniversary documentary. I think the reason I really enjoy these are because they're so informative and enthusiastic, which just shows how good the three are as presenters. The final section of this episode is the airport section. This makes me wonder if Clarkson really rants that way in commutes. So, Jeremy and Hammond made mobility vehicles that are good for airports. Jeremy made a suitcase go-kart and Hammond made a skateboard laptop. Jeremy went to the wrong gate and fell down. At this point, just ship your luggage in advance to the hotel you're staying at or something. Episode 13, dubbed Survival of the Fattest. Clarkson, May, and Hammond are dropped off in the middle of butt-fuck nowhere Mongolia, where they're airdropped kit car parts and instructions to get to the city of Marun. I used Google Translate to learn how to pronounce that. This special is quite unique among all their specials as they have minimal supplies. The goal is a town as they don't get contact with much along the way. They're also in the same car, something we haven't seen since the jet propulsion amphibious vehicle from last season? Maybe just since the hover van. It really looks like a grueling adventure with little resource, although watching the special makes me want to do a road trip to Mongolia myself. The place looks really stunning, and of course I'd make it more comfortable and have more resources though. Episode 14 is the final episode of this season. This season is a documentary about the medium-sized Ford family saloon car. This was apparently prompted by the ceasing of the production of the Ford Mondeo. The boys go on and deliver this in the normal fashion of showing the specs history, and details of the cars. But then, they continue on to relay childhood stories of their family Ford Cortinas, except Hammond, whose father didn't get one. Apparently, this was so devastating to him that he had to take a bat to his dad's old family car, and that's just the first part. Then, Jeremy starts to recall their experience reviewing different cars and how their opinion about them differ. They only ever agreed on liking one car, and that's the Mondeo. Then Jeremy says,
The Mondeo was never fancy or spectacular. It never won Le Mans. It was never awarded a Nobel Prize. It didn't write The Grapes of Wrath. It was just your mate, someone you enjoyed going to the pub with. And here's the thing. When someone fancy or spectacular, like, say, Mick Jagger dies, it'll be sad. But when your mate dies, that is heartbreaking.
like he's not only talking about the car. He's talking about their time on Top Gear and Grand Tour Studio era. At the time when I was writing this, I skipped ahead and peeked at the time where Jeremy announces the end of the studio format. And I still have the same reaction I did before. This funeral for a friend always chokes me up because I spend a large portion of my life watching these guys' adventures. They provided humor when I was low and gave me an interest in cars that I never had before. The episode then ends with Clarkson in tears announcing the end of the studio format, along with clips from Top Gear and Grand Tour in their memorable adventures. Throughout these episodes, you can clearly see that this season is mostly specials. Mongolia, Colombia, Nevada, Georgia to Azerbaijan, Scotland. The Grand Tour is becoming about Grand Tours, which was great because to me, personally, that's what I thought it was gonna be at first. And it's a good move since the BBC will never let up on being petty that their newer iteration of Top Gear never caught on. Even the BBC official Top Gear channel in YouTube is still exploiting the appearance of the three and making money from their appearances. Watching the end of Season 3 of Grand Tour feels like saying goodbye to a friend after they've passed. Jeremy, James, and Richard were my favorite comedy trio. Grand Tour did continue further, but it wasn't the same when they had the tent. The specials were absolutely fun and the trio are still hilarious, but without the studio portions, there was no space to explore ideas like the battleship segment, bad ideas for mobile gas stations, blow up a co-presenter's house, or even hilarious banterous conversations with other blokes and celebrities. After Season 3, Grand Tour was hit by something that affected all of us, COVID. But even through that, they were able to make a few hilarious specials within that period. At this time of writing, the three have reported to only have 2 episodes left to air, and I do understand why. They're getting old. And I honestly think it's okay for them to move on. They still have their own individual projects and they still appear on screen frequently. I had a lot of fun rewatching and taking notes of this season of Grand Tour. With the last 2 upcoming episodes, I don't think I'm ready to see them go. These guys are already way ahead in life, but for all the joy and entertainment they brought us in earnest, I hope their future endeavors go well and thrive. I can't help but keep looking back at the first episode I ever saw with them, heading off to a part of the world that was quite troubled at the time and showing that it's an amazing place amidst the turmoil. Their adventures became time capsules on how those places used to be and how we hope they still are. It takes me back to when I was first watching their shows, how things are simple, how small my burdens were at the time, how I can just enjoy being stupid with friends, and I'm quite attached to that feeling. Attachment is something I think people have issues with nowadays. We are attached to labels, characters, priorities, stories. These things most of us don't even really own. I'm not ready to see them retire, and I don't think I ever will. But that's not for me to decide, and it's not yours either. There will always come a time when the people we admire, the people we look up to, the people who inspire us will have to step down and someone else will take their place. And I think that's great. You can still find Top Gear and Grand Tour in their best in the internet, but I think it's important for us to discover new things. When I started this, I really didn't have any message I wanted to convey other than I like what kind of comedy they do, and I'll say it again, your mileage may vary, but I just know that for me, these guys are the funniest presenters in the. Wait, I already have that on the thumbnail. Fuck. I'd put a collection of moments here, but the BBC already struck this video, so. And on that terrible bombshell,